podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Here, we love talking about everything Batman. The BatmanUniverse.net has news, original content, and reviews about Batman comics, movies, TV shows, video games, and more. Check out the BatmanUniverse.net and join our Discord server to start chatting with fellow fans. We can't wait to talk to you guys. Also, visit our Patreon page and join our other awesome supporters. But enough of this nonsense. On with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hey, Bat fans, you're listening to the Batman Universe Podcast. This is your host, Scott, and joining me today are BJ and Adil. We have a packed episode for you, including an interview with Alan Burnett, the supervising writer and producer for the Batman the Animated Series. Before we launch into that, though, we're going to start with a news segment I'm calling the Let's Kick Some Ice Breaker, where we kind of do a round robin of overall general Batman related topics, just, things in the ether that we could talk about that aren't so tethered to movie news or comic updates or things of that nature. So we can kind of just, as the title implies, break the ice a little bit. I'm going to start right off with, what's the story that brought you to Batman and/or DC Comics? And it could be a movie, a show, comics, whatever you want to talk about. You have the platform. So I will open up the floor right there.
So I can't remember one. I think when I was a kid, everybody kind of knew I liked Batman and superheroes and things like that because of the animated series that came out when I was around 5 or 6 or whatever. So I was always watching that. But for comics, my grandmother used to go to these auctions like around the area and would get big boxes of comic books, just like randomly at the auctions, and it was filled with Nightfall comics, like Death of Superman comics, and like pre-Clone Saga Spider-Man. So I would like just kind of random, never in order, but just kind of random issues that I still have, and like through the years I've gone on and kind of filled in like the gaps of like what fits in. So that's probably that huge long box of comics. It had a Robin 1 issue in there, the Tim Drake Robin. So, and he was always one of my favorite characters. So right then I was kind of hooked on comics just from that random long box of Nightfall comics.
So my introduction to the character probably came through the animated TV show, which when I was growing up in UAE, we would get the show over there. So I did see a couple episodes and got introduced to the character at that point. As far as reading comics goes, I had a similar story to BJ. When I would vacation in Canada in the summer times, going through garage sales, I would find isolated issues. So I'd start reading them, but I never really got into reading them regularly, precisely because of the problem BJ outlined, which is that they were just isolated issues. It wasn't a continuous story. It was just really random. So I started reading regularly probably just after the New 52 started with Snyder and Capullo. And so that Court of the Owls was like really my first full storyline that I was reading completely. And then from there, I just kind of never looked back.
Nice. I know I've talked about this a lot on the show. My first introduction being the Michael Keaton movies, but which, fueled a lot of my interest in the character and everything. But as far as first comics go, I'm a very much a big horror person, always have been. I saw a lot of horror movies very young. And the first issue I ever remember owning is Robin Annual #2 from 1993, with Tim Drake Robin, but it's part of the whole Bloodlines storyline.
Bloodlines.
But if anyone knows the issue and like has seen the cover, it's, Robin's on there obviously, and someone whom I don't remember that looks kind of like they're Terminator 2 inspired a little bit, with like the metal like needle hands kind of shooting out. But there's this big green looking alien thing that looks like it was very much inspired from Alien and Aliens, like kind of in that sphere. It has more arms, but definitely feels like the artist was really leaning into that. And so as a kid seeing, something Batman related, and then, something Aliens related that was also near and dear to my heart there, that was like, a big sell for me. And so I jumped into that. I don't remember the issue. Obviously I don't think the actual story had much of an impact, but, that would fuel later comic purchases. And, eventually I became a pretty regular reader of Batman, especially with when I was younger, the animated series comic line that tied into the show. That was like a really big deal for me. But yeah, those were, though that was a top choice book at the time that kind of started it all.
I think I have that issue somewhere in my collection somewhere. I'll have to pull it out.
Let's see if I can find a picture that doesn't, that looks okay, or if I can dig it out. That's kind of an ask. I probably have it somewhere too. I haven't touched it since, but fun times. For today's episode, we have 4 topics that we'll get into in a moment. Gal Gadot related news, DCU related news, Blue Beetle, and then a quick update on something we forgot to talk about like a month ago, but we'll, jump right into that. But first, we're going to take a brief pause because we have a special interview. It's a short interview, but an interview with Alan Burnett, the award-winning supervising producer and writer for Batman the Animated Series, courtesy of FAN EXPO. It's a fun one. I get to ask him questions about Masculine Phantasm and the show, and hope you enjoy. This is Scott with the BatmanUniverse.net, and today I'm chatting with Alan Burnett, award-winning writer and producer of Batman the Animated Series, The Batman, Superman the Animated Series, and a ton of other animated works. This interview is courtesy of FAN EXPO Chicago. Hi, Alan. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
We, as you could probably tell by the site name, we are big fans of Batman the Animated Series, as well as, the Adventures Continue comic series. The first question I wanted to ask, it's been just over 30 years since the show debuted. Could you ever fathom the impact the show would have? And that, to piggyback off of that as well, that you would be telling, continued stories in this world?
Well, no on all of it. So, it started 32 years ago, I think. I think it started 91 for me, at least. I think the show debuted in 92. And then 93, we had the movie that came out. And no, I did know one thing. I knew that there was an audience for the kind of show we did, because nobody was doing a serious animated superhero show at the time. And we were lucky enough to be programmed at 3:30 in the afternoon. So we were out of that Saturday morning block, that children's block, even though we were supervised over children's programs at Fox at the time. And so we were lucky in that we could hit a little higher in the age range. And actually what we did is we went through the comics and found the elements of Batman that we liked over the years, and we were able to put them on the screen. And and it was pretty popular pretty quickly. But I didn't expect what would happen with it and how memorable it would be for people. When I go to cons, inevitably I see parents with their kids, and the parents are telling how they used to run home from school at 3:00 to make sure they saw Batman when they were their kids' age. So that was nice. And I'll also say something else. The last show I did was a show called Justice League Action. It was sort of a Super Friends show, but a good one. And that show, we made an attempt to get a lot of new writers to come into animation. You know, the 30-ish, 20s and young 30-ish writers, and we got them because many of them were eager to do a Warner Brothers animated show because they were big fans of Batman animated series years ago, and and in fact, we got a lot of primetime writers who just had to do us an animated show that featured, especially if it featured Batman. So so that was another case of seeing the influence of the show.
It's interesting because it kind of plays into the generational legacy and inspiring the next group. And actually that reminds me of one of my favorite episodes is Beware the Gray Ghost, especially as I get older. That the theme of legacy, it's both kind of a celebration of like the heroes who inspire us and then who we can inspire and pass things on to. And I was on that note, I'm kind of curious what inspired that particular episode.
It was something. Well, Tom Ruger, who was our executive producer and who wrote a couple of scripts for us, I think the idea came from him, and I immediately latched onto it because it sounded so good. If I brought anything to it, it was the toy airplanes that were being used by a mysterious villain to bomb certain things. And that was really a memory I have of the old Superman show with George Reeve. There was an episode that had a similar situation with toy airplanes. And I thought, oh, this is perfect because we're talking about a show that's really all about nostalgia. It's all about looking back and how your childhood formed you and the things you saw, maybe even on TV, that formed you. And then, of course, to top it off, we got Adam West to be the Great Ghost. And how perfect was that? Yeah,
no, that was amazing. Well, and just I feel like the theme of the episode, his character, where he starts at the beginning of the episode and where he ends, I feel like that, in a way, what I had read about Adam West at the time, it felt kind of emblematic of him as like a person outside of the Batman role too. But
yeah, he was a very nice guy. I worked with him also in Scooby-Doo stuff, and he was one of the guys like Kevin Conroy who didn't run away from being Batman. They embraced it, and the fans loved them for their entire careers. So, and he was just a very nice guy, Adam West. He was also, it's not the first time I worked with him. I did, this is how far back I go. I did the last 2 seasons of Super Friends, and there were some old voices. They sounded old. So we started to recast, and I wanted to get Adam West. Because I figured it's really, we weren't trying to do a campy show anymore, but I just wanted him because I was a fan of the old show, the 60s show, and because I knew he could act serious, and so we got him. And so I worked with him for a couple of years before he came back as the Gray Ghost.
Nice. 2023, it's the 30th anniversary of Mask of the Phantasm. And I know, at least in the Batman community, a lot of fans would argue that that's their favorite, or some would go so far as to say that is, the best Batman film ever made. In your opinion, what was your approach with Phantasm, and why do you think, that movie's particular legacy is so enduring and powerful?
Well, I think one of the things we wanted to do in the movie, and it started off, by the way, as a home video, and then got thrown into the theaters, one of the things we want to do is tell a Bruce Wayne story. We hadn't really told an origin story for Bruce Wayne. We hadn't told a real personal story for Bruce Wayne. And into this mix, we also started to think that this could be also an origin for the Joker. And so it was just doing things that in a movie that we haven't done on a television show. I mean, that's basically where we're starting from. But I wanted to tell a big Bruce Wayne story and a love story, because we just didn't get into that in the series. And that's what we did.
There's a lot of compassion and like human emotion and everything with it. And it's something, in doing a dive on it, and I've seen like old, movie reviews of it and critic reviews. And one of the ones that stands out now, also because I'm a Chicagoland local too, Roger Ebert and, Gene Siskel's, they went so far as to kind of see it as, one of the domineering animated films that really transcended what people used to think animation was, which is for, younger demographics, as this thing that can be enjoyed by everybody or, different ages, and kind of transcend, that initial, idea.
Well, I'll tell you something. When the movie first came out, it got very mixed reviews. Some people didn't care about it at all. And it tended to, in Los Angeles, it played only matinees. So I had these big movie feelings about it, and then suddenly reality hit. And I'm looking at the reviews that didn't like it, and I'm looking at the fact that nobody was seeing it at night like a real movie. And it lasted about a week, maybe a little more, I don't know. And then it was history. And I thought, well, that's that. You live, you learn, you have your hopes, and And it was a year later that my boss called me up. I may have been on vacation, I don't know. And so, you can't believe this. Siskel and Ebert have reviewed Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and they loved it. And I say, you are kidding me. And I got a copy of it soon after, and it really made me feel good. They were reviewing the home video, because the home video had come out. But Siskel said, he said essentially, we should have reviewed this a year ago when it was in the theaters. And I thought, yes, we should have. And it made me feel better. But I was really pleased by their reaction. And it was sort of a little bit of a turning point. I think they had some influence in that the movie got some more interest. Or maybe the fact that it was just the home video coming out, I don't know. But it seemed to get a better response a year later than it did when it initially came out. And it's, the fans have Batman fans have just latched onto it. So it's great. I'm very pleased.
It truly is, and fans who enjoy the animated series and the DC animated series that kind of was born out of it, they've been treated to 3 follow-up seasons of Batman, The Adventures Continue, and there's a lot of new interpretations of characters in there, like Court of Owls and Red Hood. Are there characters that, if given the opportunity, you would like to bring into the fold, or just other stories you would like to pick up and play with if possible?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, we've been sort of making this up as we go along, figuring out what we could do. And the last 3 stories are going to be Ra's al Ghul stories, essentially. And but if we did a lot of characters from the comic books that weren't featured in the animated series, like Red Hood and others. I'm not sure beyond that. I mean, if we had another year to do another year's worth of issues, we would come up with it. I just nothing is hitting me right now.
No worries. Someone on our site was asking about this, because we have, outside the animated series, you produced a lot of other, animated shows. There's Batman Beyond, which is very well loved. Then there's 2004's The Batman, which, a lot of us feel that one's kind of an underrated gem, kind of lives in the shadow. And I wanted to ask, what your approach was when producing this new and, very different Batman universe, and your take on it.
Well, I had next to nothing to do with that show. Although in the last 2 years, I was writing scripts and I was story editing the show. But that was other people were doing that show. I was in on early meetings, but I was there sort of as a figurehead. So I can't take any responsibility for the show. Only in the last 2 seasons. All I can tell you is I enjoyed it a great deal, and I thought that it was fighting. It was fighting the old show in a way, and it did it very nicely. And because it was different looking, but it was definitely another show made by people who love Batman.
Cool. That's very well said. It looks like we have time. Oh, it looks like we're kind of running out of time here. Is there any place fans can find you or interact with you? And is there anything you would like to plug before we end out?
Paul Dini and I have written the last of the Batman Adventures Continues comics, and so let me plug that because I think it's a good story. It's a lot of fun, and it wraps some things up, and that's the only main thing I have to plug, except my appearance at the Fan Expo in Chicago this weekend, and I invite people to come by. I'm a little hesitant about giving out my Facebook stuff because really, I think I'm on the verge of too many people. But people can try and become friends. I'll tell you one thing: you have to tell me who you are. If I look at about and I see nothing, But anyways, so I'm hoping to see a lot of fans this weekend. So
okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, well, thank you, Alan Burnett, for joining me, and it was great to talk to you, and hope the convention goes very well, and it was lots of fun.
Well, Scott, if you're there, come see me.
Okay. Will do.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, on to our first topic of the night. I should say Gotham Night. For those who still don't know and have been living under a rock, Gotham Knights is not returning for another season. The last episode actually aired June 27th. And shortly before that, it was announced as being canceled. And we did not talk about it in our last couple episodes, but we're bringing it up now. And I have some questions for the group. First one being, did you watch it?
No.
No, I mean, I quit the Arrowverse stuff, and I would still consider that a significant step up over this. So I did not watch this.
I will be honest, I've scrolled past it a few times and I've hesitated, and Max actually puts it at the top banner right now for me. So that's why it's kind of front and center on my mind. And it's kind of like the Jumanji board where it's like kind of beating there, and I want to try it, but I've resisted so far.
Once you click play, he might never come out, just like Jumanji.
And the follow-up question I have which is kind of the reason why I brought this topic up, because it's something that kind of interests me, and I don't think we talk about it a lot because we always talk about the positive stuff. But what's the most disappointing Batman adaptation you've ever seen?
Yeah, so I saw this question on our show notes, and it did kind of get me thinking, like, when's the last time I've really kind of been like disappointed by anything Batman? And I went in to like look at my like movie collection or whatever just to kind of refresh my memory, and I saw like Batman Ninja, but I knew going into that I really wasn't gonna be into that because I'm not really into that like anime style. But then I saw Batman and Harley Quinn, that animated movie. And I was really excited for that because it was that Bruce Timm style. It was Kevin Conroy. It was Lauren Lester back as Batman and Nightwing. And then watching it kind of made like zero impact on me. So it was so strange for them to even like go back into that animated series world and really not have it be good. Like, I don't even remember any. I think they fight Swamp Thing at the end, if I remember. Like, I only saw her once. So I really never wanted to go back to that. And I would probably say that's pretty as disappointed as I've ever been in a Batman anything.
So, I mean, technically, this Gotham Knights show would not be, because Batman is kind of, for those who don't know, dead in the first episode. So, but, if we were to sort of bend the criteria a bit, I would say this, even though I haven't seen it, based on what I've seen of it, would be most disappointing. Second, in the same sort of category, would be the Gotham TV show, because that was pretty awful. And then if you go into animation, BJ mentioned Batman Ninja, which I do think was disappointing, because I expected more based on the visuals, which were excellent, but the story left a lot to be desired. And then I think we also have to mention the Killing Joke adaptation.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes.
Simply because of that scene, and we all know what scene we're talking about, which was kind of gross and disgusting. And then other than that, I mean, the Clooney Batman, I think, is the obvious answer here.
I paid money to see The Killing Joke in theaters, and
Same.
got to see
Same.
that.
I did too.
And I was mortified, and I think I kind of just think I was done at that point. And Batman Ninja, I watched and I turned off at some point. I think I got bored, and that was that.
Sounds like we might have to do a Batman Ninja commentary. I don't know. We're all big fans of it.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. At some point, I may get up and you might hear like drinks pouring or just like random background noise. But the one I had listed for this, because I did think about this, and Gotham Knights, like, I'm going to have to also bend the rules, Adil, on this, because Gotham Knights reminded me of another show that had a similar opening premise that came out and also got canceled within the first season. And at the time, I was jazzed that this was a thing. There wasn't a lot of superhero media as there is now. And I was like, hell yeah, we're getting this. And I was like, just so disappointed. And it was Birds of Prey, which I feel like has been forgotten, and for a good reason. But, it starts off with like a little tease of like the Joker and a reference to Batman going missing. Within the rest of the show is Harley Quinn throwing out villains of the week at the Birds of Prey. And, I think they only released like 8 or 9 episodes. I'm not sure, maybe a little bit more, but it wasn't much.
Yeah, I never actually saw Birds of Prey. I think it was airing a little. I was a bit too young when it started airing, I think, and then I just kind of watched it years later, which obviously aging didn't help it at all. So yeah, I just decided never to see it.
Yeah, the only thing I remember that like still sticks with me is at some point Harley Quinn, she's like I don't know if she's like an evil scientist or whatever's going on there, but she makes a villain equivalent of Hydro Man, and that was also another like hit to my heart. But yeah, those are all pretty solid, painful picks, and I'll have to mull over the commentary on Batman Ninja if I want to try again or not. Our next topic is kind of along the lines of more bad news. I don't know. It depends on how you feel about this. I call this segment Gal Gadot news. It's related to the weird, I don't know if people have been following these things as closely as we have on our Discord, but the weird back and forth dance with what's happening with Wonder Woman in the James Gunn, Peter Safran DC universe that's forthcoming. Do the quick bites of this story. August 2nd, Gal Gadot was on a press tour and suggested to comicbook.com that Wonder Woman 3 was in development. A quote from that article, is, "It's so close to and dear to my heart. From what I heard from James and from Peter, is that we're going to develop a Wonder Woman 3 together." And then shortly after that, she doubled down in another interview with Flaunt magazine, saying that she was assured it was happening. And then it should have been, I have the wrong date on here, but a few days later, or I think it was within the week, Variety reported, according to sources, a third Wonder Woman film is not in development at DC Studios, nor do Gunn and Safran have plans at this time for any Wonder Woman project in the new DC universe other than their previously announced Paradise Lost prequel series for Max. So kind of like, I mean, it's not the same as the Henry Cavill situation. That was a little bit different, and we covered that a while ago. But, you know, this weird false stop thing that's going on with all these new movies in development, kind of strange, but that's the latest as far as Wonder Woman's is concerned. And, you know, the things I wanted to ask, you know, did you have any thoughts or reactions to this? And, you know, to piggyback off of that, would you want a third Wonder Woman movie with Gal Gadot?
Well, I think I can guess where you two guys are leaning, based on what you guys have said about Gal in the past. But I would like a third Gal Gadot movie. I don't know if it's going to happen, because I think kind of if Gunn says it, I think it's true. But if we hear from sources or things like that, then I'm kind of iffy on it. But to keep it simple, yes, I would like one. But I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret I'm no fan of Gal Gadot, and it's mostly because I don't think she can act. So I know many people will probably disagree with me, but I mean, I just don't really see her in that role. That being said, you know, I actually really did think the first film was really good. Wasn't great, but you know, it was really good. And the second one, we'll just leave it at that. But I think the thing to pick out from the story was that it once again seems, at least from the public perception point of view, that DC doesn't know what's happening within, or the Warner Brothers doesn't know what's happening within their own studio with regard to the DC universe. And the hiring of Gunn was supposed to clarify a lot of these things. And to be fair to him, he has been pretty open, right? Like, he has been talking about it on Twitter. He's been, you know, refuting rumors that are plainly false. He's been offering clarity on rumors that are true. But this once again feels like a little bit like the old regime. So I'm not really a fan of it from that standpoint either. And I do want to mention one thing about that Paradise Lost series. It's interesting that DC seems to be really promoting that. Like, I was looking at, we got Fan Expo coming up, so I'm looking through what comics I want to buy and stuff. And I was looking at the Wonder Woman Historia thing on a local Canadian bookstore, just to kind of compare prices. And in the blurb, it says, like, it explicitly mentions that show. So they're really pushing the comics as well, which I think is great. But, you know, at the end of the day, even if they recast Gal Gadot and make it someone who's more easily going to be able to connect to that TV series, then I think that's fine.
Yeah, no, that's a really good thought about that. And, you know, something you said, you kind of answered a follow-up question I had about this, or at least, you know, your feelings on this is, you know, as this developed, it did make me think of, you know, what you called the old regime, and kind of like that this may have just been a ploy at how they were working, you know, with Black Adam and everything going on there with producers just saying things and vying for powers or scraps or fighting and trying to like fake it till you make it or wish it into existence and see, you know, what the reaction was, which, you know, worked for Zack Snyder's Justice League. It took some time, but that was a thought I had where it was just like, maybe Gal Gadot is just, I can't comment on what she may or may not be thinking, but, you know, just made me wonder if it was like just trying to force it into existence by giving interviews. And
can I ask you guys a question? So there's always, with the whole new regime, and then there's still like Momoa out there as Aquaman, and like there's always this tie to the past and the future, and everyone just says, oh, it should just be a hard reset, cancel all the old things, blah blah blah. But my response to that is like, it can't be as simple as just cancel this movie. I know we did it once with Batgirl, but it can't just be as simple as cancel this movie with Momoa, because I mean James Wan's like, he's a pretty semi well known director, and Momoa, like, say what you want about him, like he's a pretty big name, like a household name. People know him. Like, I wouldn't call him A-list or anything, but he's pretty popular. And like, if you cancel this movie, like, you're gonna alienate like two pretty big like actors, like, and director from like the studio Warner Brothers. And I don't think they can be in the business of alienating people, because didn't they do this to Chris Nolan? Am I right? Like, Oppenheimer wasn't Warner Brothers, right?
No, it was Universal. And actually,
Yeah, so
I have a theory that part of the themes in that movie are, it's kind of like when Jon Favreau made Chef, where part of the themes in that movie, there's like this weird thread about about creators being like tossed aside and like used and kind of abused. And I have a theory that that was Christopher Nolan, like, layering a little pot shot into his movie at Warner Brothers. But
yeah, but like, so I'm sure Warner Bros. Would have loved to have Oppenheimer and Barbie. Like, I mean, they're both pretty popular, but like, I don't know how you guys feel, but I just don't see it as simple as like cancel all the old things, like never release the Flash, maybe they shouldn't have released the Flash, but cancel all these other things and just move forward. Like, it can't just be like when they did New 52. Like, it's not as simple. I don't know how you guys feel.
Yeah, it's not that simple, because, with the New 52, those are characters on a page. They're not real people, right? So, like, with this, they're actors, they have contracts, directors have contracts. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of business stuff behind the scenes that, I think most people aren't factoring into their decision making. But I would kind of distinguish the Aquaman stuff from the Wonder Woman stuff. So, like, Wonder Woman already made 2 movies. Aquaman, okay, there was just one, and I think the second one was already in production when all this other stuff started going. So I was never someone who was saying, oh, cancel Aquaman 2, but I would say after Aquaman 2 comes out, and which I'm really looking forward to, because I really enjoyed the first one, but I would say after the second one comes out, maybe hold off on making a third one. Or if you want to incorporate it into this new DCU that you're building, you have to do that via that Flash movie that they just released. So, I mean, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to do. I think they definitely. I mean, I would have preferred to bring back Cavill, obviously, but that's not happening. So now they've recasted Superman. They've recast Batman. I think it only makes sense to kind of recast Wonder Woman if it's, I think those 3 characters are kind of the most important DC characters, and it would just kind of feel weird to have Wonder Woman be the same as the previous regime, and then Batman and Superman be kind of different. I think Aquaman, even though he's kind of like a main member of the Justice League, is enough of like a B-list character in the general audience's mind that if you have Jason Momoa and you bring him in via the Flashpoint whatever, that I think they would buy it. But I don't know. It as you said, it is definitely very, very complicated.
Yeah.
Well, I think you kind of touched on it. Like, with Aquaman's not part of the Trinity, so they could make Aquaman 2 could do very well, and they could make Aquaman 3. But he doesn't have to appear in a Justice League movie. He's not like essential to that. They could just totally just have him ride out his Aquaman days, in his own little movie verse and call it that. And, what we're talking about, like, I think the Flash, I feel like might be their way of like opening up to where if they ever wanted to pick up these pieces and play with them, even though they're disconnected, they could have franchises keep running, even though they're not connected to the new DCU, and just say, oh, it's part of the multiverse. But it also reminds me of like about a year ago when I was interviewing Michael Uslan, the at least his thoughts on it. And I wonder if this was like, thoughts that other producers shared, is that we live in this world where you can have multiple interpretations running at the same time. And now more so than like 20 or 30 years ago, audiences just get it and just kind of expect it and roll with it. And it's no big deal. So, there's no reason to totally like stamp out that fire or, put it out and extinguish it. Like, you can just let it be. And it's just kind of its own thing. And on the flip side, like as a viewer, I would get really tired if every 5 to 10 years they just kept rebooting, because we had like, and I know it's not the same and it's not connected, but like you had the Nolan trilogy, and then we had the Snyderverse, and now we have the Reeves series starting up and ramping up, and now we're, even though we're not doing a Batman origin story, we're like starting again.
Yeah, like he's like, we kind of like just reading comics, like I think we kind of always get sick of like a new crisis event and a new status quo, but I'm sure for the general audience, like I'm sure they're kind of sick of it too. Like every 2 minutes, like there's always the joke, like, oh, there's always a new Batman like coming in a few years, like, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I guess like good one, I say, but.
Yeah, I think the Batman one kind of sticks out because the reboot to the Snyderverse was supposed to continue. Like, we're supposed to still be in that iteration right now, but we only got the Reeveverse because that one kind of didn't work out. And I also think, like as you said, you could keep these franchises going, but I would also say that okay, Aquaman 2 is getting made, but at most, Aquaman, Wonder Woman are only going to get one more movie. Like these things don't extend really past a trilogy at all. Like it's usually 3 and then they're done. And you kind of see that across the board. And to your point about rebooting, I think that's the problem Marvel's running into right now, right? Like how do you still keep the interest going? And I think part of the problem for, at least with a lot of the general audience, I know there's a lot of really hardcore comic fans who are invested in the characters themselves, but the general audience doesn't really have a connection to Iron Man per se. They have a connection to Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. And so how do you, and I think that's a testament to the power of DC's characters, is that there have been so many iterations of these characters that even though it's to varying degrees, but they have legitimately resonated with audiences. So I think, that's what they have going for them.
True. Yeah, it's a good point. But I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. Speaking of the continued old guard or old regime for DC movies, even though this kind of fits in the middle of both universes, and James Gunn has come out and said it's part of his new DCU. Blue Beetle has been getting some early buzz. It's early reactions have filtered out within the last week or so. I think Adil, you shared this, so I can't take credit for that. But there's no aggregate scores, but all the reviews are really positive. And this quote, and I think you highlighted this as well, the best post-Nolan superhero film came out of it, which, your mileage may vary hearing that. But my question with all this news is, does this change your desire to see it?
I was always kind of interested. The nice thing about this for me is that there are no stakes. Like, I don't care about the character that much, so I'm not going to be super offended if, this element of it or this aspect of it isn't in there, or they added this aspect in there. I'm kind of just going in like, let me enjoy this and, have a good time. So I was kind of going to check it out on, the day where, tickets are discounted. And everything I've seen from the initial trailer to now has kind of been positive. So I kind of feel even better about going to see it and about, what it could be. The big test will be like, will anyone go to see it? I mean, we just saw the Flash's box office totals. Really dismal, to be honest. So I wonder how this will do.
Yeah, I'll probably see it this weekend. I think it looks fun, like Adil said, and I think it'll be kind of almost refreshing to see a superhero movie where the multiverse isn't collapsing or the world isn't ending. Like, we're just gonna have this kid fly around with a beetle on his back, looking like a super Power Ranger, fighting like some other guy who looks like a beetle, which I'm fine with. Like, I love the actor who's playing Jaime, my man from Cobra Kai. I think he's like he's always seems pretty fun and charming, like in interviews, and seems excited to play superhero. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, it gave me pause because it reminded me of the Flash marketing, all those quotes that came out beforehand. But at the same time, like I'll probably still see it, and I think I have a feeling it'll do better than the Flash. I mean, not that that's saying much, but I think it'll at least beat the Flash in the sense that it's like new and it feels fresher and it's not like the same old, same old. So I have high hopes for it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that scenario, happening. Like people think that we will never get a full autopsy on why The Flash failed as a film. But I think if Blue Beetle does outperform The Flash at the box office, that will be saying something, because The Flash had the Keaton version of Batman in it, which was immensely popular. The Snyder version of Batman, which is popular with some people. And by the way, you mentioned the Snyder cut earlier. The Ayer cut might be a thing soon. I've seen some buzz about that, so that might be happening. But yeah, I mean, if Blue Beetle outperforms them, and I think DC has some thinking to do with the executive level.
I just feel like they don't have the Ezra Miller problem, and maybe that'll help. Well, along with it being new and different, but we'll see how it shakes out. The last topic we have, and this came in hot today, so it's kind of off the cuff, but to do the cliff notes of it, Glenn Howerton shared some fan art that made him look like Lex Luthor in like the power suit, and he said some comment like "whoa" or something like that. Nothing deep or anything, but the internet kind of lit up and is now wondering if he's been cast as Lex Luthor in Superman Legacy. And the things that point to whether or not that might be true, that people reference that Glenn Howerton was actually the second pick, supposedly, for James Gunn to play Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he has been open about wanting to play Mr. Fantastic for Marvel. And so he seems like he has his sights on the superhero genre, but more importantly, he has a James Gunn connection. So I'm not bringing this up to debate whether or not this is real, because obviously we'll know sooner or later. But I thought it was interesting casting if it were true. And my question is, could you see it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I know we were talking before we started recording. He might have a weird bald-looking head, but you can always do Gene Hackman it and throw a leg on him, and we're all set. Keep him in the power suit and never have to see his head. But I mean, yeah, James Gunn turned Andy Dwyer from Parks and Rec to a full-on Guardian of the Galaxy, so who knows what he's going to do with Dennis Reynolds.
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with this actor, but based on the fan art, I mean, definitely has the look for it to pull it off. So, I mean, I think that's definitely a possibility. The article that you shared also mentions that Nicholas Hoult, I think is his name, he was the runner-up for the Superman role. And they're saying that he could also be in the running for Lex Luthor, which I think is funny because there was all those memes from the menu with what's his name, the guy who played Voldemort, whispering in his ear, "You lost out on Superman." It would be funny if they cast him as Lex Luthor as well, because then he would lose out on Superman and Lex Luthor. Not that I'm wishing that on him. I'm just saying for the meme and joke side of it, it would be funny.
No, I did see that one, and I thought that I think that would be hilarious. I actually like this pick if it were true. I do like him a lot, and It's Always Sunny, and I could see him playing a very maniacal villain that that can switch on a dime from being kind of friendly but yet terse, and then being completely unhinged. So I could see it, but I guess we will find out.
It'll be better than Jesse Eisenberg. I'll say that. I'll throw that out there.
You mean Zuckerberg?
Yeah.
That's all the news we have this week for the Batman Universe podcast. You can visit us at thebatmanuniverse.net for comic reviews, movies, movie news, and more. If you want to chat with us, hop on our Discord. There will be a link below. You can also write us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net, and we'll respond to your comments on air. If you like these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and share.